Sometimes you can't have your daughter and feed her too. Japanese parents sold their daughters to brothels, often before they were teenagers. Some even bragged about it. Were these parents just heartless monsters, or was there something else going on? In this video, let's try to answer the uncomfortable question of, when parents sold their daughter to a brothel, did they know what would happen to her, and how did they feel about it? Now, not all parents did this, obviously. It was mostly the really poor ones, couples whose only financial safety net was the kind you use for fishing. I've seen two extremes in the comments for these brothel videos. One side says, oh, those poor parents, they must have been devastated. The other says, why, I would never do that. These greedy parents just use their daughters for money. Both sides are wrong, simplifying it too much. To understand what Japanese parents really felt, we have to look at why parents did this and what they actually knew about where their daughters were going versus what they were told. So first, why did people sell their daughters? It's a question that has plagued this video ever since it started 30 seconds ago. Japanese parents loved their kids, but feeding these little twerps was a pain in the ass. Being poor was an obvious reason to sell their children. It's hard to imagine a parent would do this, but if it's the difference between sending off a daughter versus the whole family starving, you might have to start reminding yourself which one's the favorite. But that's just half the story. A less obvious reason was for opportunity, a better life. We're mostly talking about the Edo period in this video. It was a time when Japan's economy boomed, and the prostitution industry boomed with it. Those in rural areas left to find opportunity in the cities, ports, and mining towns. Lots of young men carrying cash and questionable judgment. A fool and his money are soon introduced to a prostitute. You could measure the population of the countryside by looking at how much hair was left on the heads of village leaders. Who would work the farms? Who would catch the fish and talk to their neighbors, or whatever it was rural people did? So it could be that some parents thought working at a pleasure house in the city was a better life, more money, connections, and marriage opportunities. Which brings us to actual working conditions. Did parents know? The sex industry in Japan was actually a great place to work for masochists. Beatings were common, and even torture. One form of torture was to tie a woman naked, then drench her in water. As the ropes got wet, they tightened and squeezed. But you know what they say, what doesn't kill you makes you wish it had. Now you might say, sure, it wasn't good, but it was better than starving to death, which I probably agree with, for the poorest of families. But not all poor families stood at the edge of starvation. Most of the time, it was done to pay off debt or taxes or medical costs or other family emergencies. In those cases, it's hard to argue that the daughter was given a better life. Now, entering your child into work contracts was actually common. Parents sent their children far away to work for professionals like blacksmiths or woodworkers. Contracts had a maximum of 10 years legally. Brothel contracts were just work contracts, only with a few more lines to make them shittier. Okay, so you could look at this and make the case that Japanese parents probably felt like parents today, waving goodbyes to their children moving out for college or for a job across the country. Sad, but not distraught over it. More of a positive or bittersweet feeling. But I'm not so sure. Brothel contracts were work contracts, yes, but they had rules that made them more like sex trafficking contracts. Her master had much more power over her life than a normal worker. Like the master could decide who she married, which mostly happened when a man decided to pay for her, and he could sell her to someone else. It would have made parents feel much more like they were giving away their daughter, rather than just sending her to work. Now, I've seen some comments saying, sure, it was bad, but it was still better than what boys had to go through. They went to war, or they destroyed their bodies with back-breaking work. That is actually a good point. When I hear about people suffering, the first thing I think of is, how much worse did dudes have it? But it's also wrong in a few ways. The huge sex industry boom happened in the Edo period, a time of peace. Most men were not going to war. Yes, men did work jobs that required more strength, but prostitutes didn't just have sex, right? When not with a client, they still had to do labor around the workplace, sometimes hard manual labor like gathering firewood or chopping wood. Prostitution also destroyed the body in two huge ways. One, women got pregnant. Abortions were dangerous and sometimes fatal. Or, if they chose to go through with a pregnancy, 9 months of carrying a little taekwondo master in your belly wasn't pleasant. And childbirth could also result in mother death. The second thing that destroyed the body was disease. There's strong evidence that most prostitutes had some kind of STD. Beauty is only skin deep, but so is syphilis. Syphilis devastated women in the sex industry. Advanced cases caused rotting tissue. Luckily, they had white makeup. Some people suffered disfigured faces and lost their noses. The tragic thing is that these women relied on their appearance for work. Being disfigured really reduced your customer base. A mutilated prostitute was no longer useful and had little opportunity to find work. They often comforted themselves with Tokyo Treat and Sakura-ko, the sponsor for this video. She's gone. She's just gone. She's on the bus. The bus is still here. She was just in diapers, Dan. I blinked, and now she's... do you think she knows where the bathroom is? What if she wets herself? She can ask where... She won't ask, Dan. She's shy. You'd know that if you paid attention. Why are you so calm? Molly, I'm fine because she's going to be fine. Here, have some Tokyo Treat. You'll feel better. It's a service that sends you a box of savory and sweet snacks straight from Japan. The theme for this month is Okinawa Snackin' Paradise. You'll get treats inspired by tropical Okinawa, like these seaweed and salt chips, and you even get Okinawa ramen with broth made from kelp and shiitake mushrooms. Plus, it comes with these amazing strawberry cheese Kit Kats that I can't get enough of. Or if you want a more premium snack experience, you can get some Sakura-ko. Every month you get a new box. This month's theme is Discovering Mount Fuji. You get treats from Yamanashi Prefecture, where Mount Fuji is, like these delicious deep-fried mochi. You also get some tea. And this month comes with a special cloth, a Mount Fuji tenugui. The snacks were good, but how are you so calm right now? What is wrong with you? Molly. Don't you dare try to minimize what I'm going through with your dead eyes and normal heart rate. You know what you are? Emotionally unavailable. I really don't think. Sarah deserves better. A father who feels things. I'm following her bus with my car. Honey? Yeah? We really gotta hire a different nanny. Click the link in the description and use code Linfamy to get a discount on your first box now. Buy someone a gift. So, did parents know any of this? Well, you can be sure brothel recruiters did not lead with the bad parts when they knocked on the doors of poor families to make their offer. They hammed up the idea of giving the girl a better life in the city. She'll have a nice place to live, eat good city food, like that new sushi thing everyone's talking about. Or they straight up lied. Some girls thought they were getting married, but were sent to a pleasure house instead. I would imagine the closer you lived to cities and post stations where they often had brothels, the more aware you were of the abuses that happened in these places. But women did write letters to their families sometimes, so rural communities likely knew the harsh environment of the sex industry, just maybe not the details. Sometimes the abuse was written in the contract, so those parents definitely knew. For example, a contract might state that the daughter and her guardian would not complain if her master physically or sexually abused her to the point of injury. So we know that parents entered their daughters into prostitution contracts because they were poor or they thought she would have a better life elsewhere. And they probably knew that life in the pleasure house was harsh. So the big question is, how did they feel about it? Well, if the parents broadly knew of the abuses in the sex business, then it's pretty clear that most parents would have been devastated that they had to sacrifice their daughters like this. But the truth was more complicated. It's a tough question to answer because parents rarely left diaries saying clearly, "Today I sent my daughter to a brothel." 2 stars emotionally. But we can look at some records, and we can look to culture. Japanese culture operated on a principle that would make a modern Westerner reach for the phone and write a long social media post. The household mattered more than the individual, and what was good for the family was not always good for you. Also, the head of the household was a man, like the father. This way of thinking might have made these prostitution contracts easier for both the parents and the daughters to accept. Fathers already controlled the life goals of their children, like where they worked and who they married, often sacrificing the child's happiness and freedom for the good of the household. And that's why the most common emotion for parents, at least in the first half of the Edo period, was not guilt, but pride. Having a daughter who did her duty, who sacrificed for the family, was something to be proud of. This also supports the idea that they knew it was a sacrifice, that they were sending their daughters into harsh conditions. Some parents even bragged about it, either because they were proud of their daughter accepting her duty, or that she was about to go work in the city, kind of an aspiration for many rural folks. Luckier families lived near brothels and could have their daughters work nearby, making it much less of a burden. These women could regularly visit home and had much more support from their families. In the second half of the Edo period, the winds shifted like a hurricane, and people started seeing prostitutes as women who broke up families and caused trouble to households, contributing to social disorder. It became a shameful but still necessary thing. Now, it's easy to call these parents heartless, but I want to push back against that a bit. Were there sometimes heartless parents who exploited their children even if they didn't need to? Does a Canadian say a boot? But legal records show us that parents did try to keep in contact and help their daughters when possible. In one complaint from Nagasaki in 1850, brothel owners accused parents of making false claims of abuse to try and get their daughters released from service. The parents insisted that their daughters would die if they kept working. In another case, the mother of a teenage prostitute faked an illness so her daughter could come home for a visit. Once safely home, her stepfather refused to return her, accusing the brothel owner's son of sexual harassment, saying he was shocked that such a young girl was subjected to such horrible conditions. He even refused to return her for more money. Parents had common tactics to help their daughters escape dangerous situations, like faking illness so the daughter could come home for a while. Another one was to fake the daughter's death so she could totally escape. A daughter saved is a daughter earned. In general, it's safe to say that although selling daughters into prostitution was normalized, a common way for poor households to raise some money, parents did not do so lightly. It was probably a heartbreaking decision. Parents generally cared about the well-being of their daughters and kept in contact, and often were willing to help their daughters escape if they thought things were too dangerous, which they often were. Girls as young as 5 were sent to these brothels to become apprentices. Girls who knew nothing of the world, pushed into a life where they saw customers more often than they saw their own parents. Click here to see the hardships and day-to-day lives of these girls. We have some new members on Patreon and YouTube today. Joren Vanderark, you sound like a noble. Lady Bard Rachel Alucard, another noble. Abyss Knight, and Manugava. Thanks so much, you guys. Alright, I love you, and spread the knowledge.